In today's video, we are going to be talking about Native American DNA that is found in African Americans and the truth that is behind these numbers. Now, real quick, before I get started, let me get this out the way. To be clear, a lot of Black Americans may claim to be Native American or have Native American ancestry, but the truth behind the genetics is overwhelmingly African. In this video, we are going to break down exactly what it means for an African American to possess indigenous DNA and how rare is it, and how historical interactions, both forced and voluntarily, led to this genetic marker in some of our people. Now, we've all heard that one brother or one sister that claim to be indigenous. Well, today, family, we are going to put those facts right here on the table. What does the DNA actually say? And how often does this really happen? And most importantly, what does this mean about our identity today? So stay tuned because we're about to separate the myth from the science. Now, before we get started, we need to know about the three types of DNA: Y-DNA, autosomal DNA, and mitochondrial DNA. So when we talk about Y-DNA or the Y chromosome, we are talking about these genetic markers are passed down from father to son. Now, the reason why this specific DNA is so important because it traces a direct line. Secondly, we have autosomal DNA. Autosomal DNA is a mixture of all of your ancestors. Now, the only setback that autosomal DNA has is it fades over generations. So each generation has a weaker version of the original. Now, last but not least, we have dear mama, mtDNA, better known as mitochondrial DNA. Now, what makes mitochondrial DNA so special is the mother can pass these genetics to her son and her daughter. So your mitochondrial DNA will tap into a lineage as well. It will tap into a line just like the Y DNA from the father. So now that we know all of this, let's see how an African American would possess indigenous DNA. So if an African American possess an indigenous haplogroup, mitochondrially speaking, of A, B, C, D, and X, that means their direct maternal ancestor was indigenous. So if an African American male has a haplogroup of Q from the Y chromosome, that means somewhere down the line, they have an indigenous male ancestor that gave them that gene. Now, before all of you hot blue feather individuals get excited about this information, we need to see how often does this really happen. So the average African American is about 80 to 90% African, with only 0 to 5% of Native American DNA in their ancestry. About 5 to 10% of African Americans have a Native maternal ancestor. So there's only 1 to 3% of African American men that have Native American paternal ancestry. Most African Americans today don't have a significant amount of Native ancestry. And that's because African DNA dominates because our lineages traces us back to West and Central Africa. The idea that a large amount of African Americans possess Native DNA is a myth and is not backed by any genetic evidence at all. Now, the real question that we all should be asking is, how did Native American DNA get in some of African Americans, but not all? So during the colonial periods between 16 and 1700s, you had Native and African American enslavement. People tend to forget that we had maroon colonies and we had Black Native alliances with some of the indigenous. Escaped African slaves often had refuge with some of these indigenous tribes. So between the two cultures, you will have some intermingling, and this is where that mtDNA and that Y chromosome was passed. And what about the 5 civilized tribes and the enslavement of Africans? The Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Seminole all had enslaved Africans, just like white folks did. Now, after the Civil War, a lot of these enslaved Africans became freedmen, but genetic studies showed that they still kept their African lineages. Now, the truth of the matter is, Africans left more of a genetic impact on native populations than the other way around. Now, this obsession with wanting to be native has turned into erasure, both for the Africans and the Native Americans. This tactic is used to disconnect us from who we are. African people have one of the most well-documented, one of the most richest genetic legacies in the world. We must reconnect with our African heritage and not chase down watered down myths. And if you're tired of watered down history, go ahead and hit that like button, share, and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment. Have any of you guys ever taken a DNA test? Put your haplogroups in the comment section. Can you do that? And before I go, speaking of DNA, I met Dr. Gina Page. She is the CEO of AfricanAncestry.com. If you guys were with me last year, you saw her in the house and she rocked the show. So I'm waiting on an interview date and I will let you guys know. Other than that, I will talk right back with you later. Peace.